Hey Pre-Calc, Mr. Rashid here, and in this section we are going to cover how to convert from graphs to functions or from situations to functions. And now specifically I'm going to start with going from situations of a certain type to functions. The type of situation we're dealing with is one where we're just given a set of parameters and then we have to write either the sine or the cosine function from those parameters. In this case, it's just the sine function on this slide. So let's go through these. Let's look at our parameters first. We're given something that's just p, and then p stands for period. So that is a period. A stands for amplitude. So if you remember back, the period is how many times it cycles, the function cycles over a certain time and repeats itself. So in pi over 2, basically what we're saying is it repeats once in that period. And then the amplitude is the distance from the center line. So how high above the center line it goes or how far below the center line it goes. So that is the amplitude. Then what's missing is we don't have a vertical shift. So remember, the vertical shift is if the graph is moved all the way up or all the way down a certain distance. So there's no vertical shift here, so we're going to put down 0 for that. And then the fourth one that we're missing is a phase shift. So the phase shift is a movement to the right or to the left for the graph. And in this case, we're not given any kind of phase shift, so the assumption there is that that is 0. Okay, so let's go through and write some of these down. So if you're given any amplitude numbers, then the amplitude is just the a value that you're given. So you're done. There's no real work there to be done or anything. I'll come back to the period in a second, but let's go to let's talk about the phase. Let's do the vertical shift. So your d value is equal to whatever your vertical shift is. So if you're shifting up sort of 2 units, then your d value is positive 2. If you're shifting down 2 units, then your d value is negative 2. So you'll just be given your vertical shift. Like you can see in problem 2 here, we're given positive 6 as our vertical shift. So that is what we'll write down. Okay, so let's actually put this function down here. So y is equal to a sine b x plus c. And what I'm going to do is just as soon as I get some value, then I'm going to erase it and then write down what it is. Okay, so the a value I can see is 12. So let's just replace that with 12. Then d is a vertical shift. I know that is 0. So I'm going to replace the d value there with 0. And then let's talk about the c value. In this case, your c value, let's use a different color. So your c value is equal to negative your vertical or your phase shift. So negative of your given phase shift. In this case, it's just 0, so negative 0 is just 0. So we can write here, this is going to be just 0. It doesn't affect this particular problem at all. Okay, then the last one here, what have we got, is b. So remember, to figure out what b was, what we did was we took 2 pi and we divided it by, we took 2 pi, we divided it by b, and that gave us the period. Or if we were dealing with degrees, then what we did was we took 360 degrees and then divided it by b, and that gave us the period. Now we've got kind of the opposite problem. We're given the period, and now we have to figure out what the b value is. So what you could do is multiply both sides by b and then divide by the period, and you would get basically the period and b would switch positions. And so you're left with this kind of formula. Let me erase this. So you're left with 2 pi divided by the period is equal to b, or 360 divided by the period is equal to b. And you'll have to judge whether you're dealing with periods in radians or periods in degrees. Okay, so those two formulas will give you, let's use capital B. That's what is being used here. So capital B. So that will be the period. And in this case then, let's do the calculation off to the side. So we have here 2 pi divided by pi over 2. And that's the same as 2 pi times 2 over pi, and then that gets me 4. So then my b value, and that makes sense because basically what we're saying is it cycles through 4 times compared to your regular parent sine function. So I can replace this here with 4, right? So that is where that came from. And then let's just simplify all of this. So this is, so one thing about these kinds of problems is we don't know whether the sine function is sort of going from the starting position for the sine. So here's your parent sine function. Right, so we don't know right now whether the sine function looks like that or whether it's reflected. We just don't have enough information here right now. So instead of writing 12 there, what I'm going to do is put plus or minus in place of that. So plus or minus 12, then sine, and x plus 0 is just x, so I've got sine of 4x, and the rest of it is just 0 there. So this then is my final answer for this problem. Okay, so I covered A, the amplitude, B, the period, and or B, the value that's related to the period, and then C, the phase shift. Remember, we take the negative for that, and then D, which is the vertical shift. So let's do one more problem down here. Okay, so we can write, and I can erase these and just place the numbers in there. So sine of B, x plus C plus D. Okay, so let's just put some barrier there. All right, so we're given a vertical shift. So this V here is a vertical shift. So my D value is just 6. So that was easy. Okay, so that becomes 6 there. Then I have an A value that's just given to me, and that is 3. So let's erase this and write down 3 in its place. Okay, now we have a period of 2 pi. So 2 pi divided by, our given period is 2 pi. 2 pi divided by 2 pi is just 1. So in place of b here, I can write 1. Okay, then the very last one is the phase shift. So my C value is going to be negative my given phase shift. And in this case, it is negative, and the value that I'm given is pi over 4. So instead of C, I'm going to write negative pi over 4. Okay, so that's negative pi over 4. So now that we've got all of these parameters figured out, let's just write the final form. So y is equal to 3, okay, so once again, just like in the very last problem, we don't know whether it's a sine curve that is going in a positive direction or it's a sine curve that's going down first. And so I'm going to write here plus or minus. So plus or minus 3 sine, and 1, we don't have to write that. And then I'm just left with x minus pi over 4 and plus 6. And that's it. That's the final form. Okay, let's go on and look at doing the same thing now, but this time with the cosine function. So I don't see the form up here, so I'm going to write it. So cosine, we've got a, y is equal to a cosine of b, x plus c plus d. Okay, so let's write it down here too. So y is equal to, and maybe now I can just do the writing here. So this is 4 is my amplitude. Then I've got cosine. I've got to still figure out what my b value is. Then my c value is negative of my phase shift. So in this case, it's negative pi over 8. A negative of negative is a positive, so that's going to be positive pi over 8. So b value is x plus pi over 8. And so I've got that. And then my vertical shift is 2. So that your d value is just the same as your vertical shift, which is just 2 in this case. So plus 2. So the only thing I have to figure out is my b value. And so for b value, I'm doing, we can just write it in here. So the b value is 2 pi divided by 4 pi, which is the period that we're given here. So 2 pi divided by the period. So let's just simplify some of this. 2, 4, and remember we're just doing plus or minus because we don't know again which direction things are going in. So plus or minus 4 cosine 2 pi over 4 pi is 1/2. And then I have x plus pi over 8, and this is all plus 2. Okay, so this is my final function in this case. All right, so let's do the very last problem here. So once again, we are still working with the cosine. So write the function, the cosine function for this. So we'll write here y equals a cosine b x plus c plus d. All right, so for A is going to be the amplitude. And in this case, the amplitude is given to us, so we have 1/2, so A is just 1/2. So let's replace that with 1/2. Okay, then for my b value, so the b values, and notice I'm in degrees here, so the b value is going to be 360 degrees divided by the period. So here I have 360 and I'm given a period of 60 degrees. So 360 divided by 60 is 6. So I replace my b value here with 6. Then for my c value is equal to negative of my phase shift. So the phase shift that's given in this problem is negative 45. So negative 45, negative is a positive, so this is 45 degrees. So that is 45. And then the d value is the same as your vertical shift. Vertical shift we have, so vertical shift is negative 3, so my d value is negative 3. So I can erase that and then put in negative 3. And just like we did in the last problems, we don't really know if this is a positive cosine, so it's going from peak to peak, or is it going from valley to valley. So with negatives, we don't know. There's just not enough information given in this problem, so we're going to put plus or minus. So let's write the final form then. So y is equal to plus or minus 1/2 cosine 6 x plus 45 in parentheses minus 3. Okay, so that's it. In the next video, we'll look at different kinds of situations and also graphs.